What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Gooner channel. Now, it's been a couple of days. I've let the dust settle. The aftermath of our tempestuous trip to Manchester, the battle that took place, a hard-fought draw, I think, is an understatement. And there are lots of ways to look at this, but what I want to take a quick peek at in this short video. There will be a discussion on it tonight on the live, but in this short video, I just want to address some of the key points because there are so many talking points from this game. But the one that seems to have emerged from Manchester City, both their fans and some of their players, is that Arsenal employed every dark art known to football in order to somehow steal what would otherwise been a deserved victory for Manchester City. And overlooking the fact that we had a player sent off in a fractious encounter for essentially not barging, which on some level I think you could have maybe understood. He did barge a player, but then so did Erling Haaland. No, instead he got sent off for kicking the ball away, which is also true of Doku. But apparently Doku was kicking the ball in a more constructive way. And look, if I'm honest, over the time since the game, I've come to feel that Leandro Trossard should take some of the blame here for being sent off. I don't think that we can really argue that by the letter of the law that he could have stayed on. However, the broader discussion on this has to be about where this law has come from and why it only seems to be applied to us injudiciously. Szoboszlai was not sent off for Liverpool. Lots of people are not getting cards for this. It seems to be applied not consistently enough. And that's a separate issue for a separate day. But this video, as I said, is to address really a much more fundamental issue, which was that it seems to be acceptable to say that Arsenal time wasted. Now, to some degree, you have to think we must have time wasted a fair bit because they added 10 minutes of time to the end of the game, which does beg the question as well if we're not being punished twice, because we get punished at the end of the first half, having a man sent off for kicking the ball away in 2 minutes past the amount of injury time they're supposed to be. So he's actually time wasting in time that's already been added on, which seems unusual anyway. But he is time wasting in that period. As I said, I'll take a red card. Maybe that's fair. Maybe that's the letter of the law, etc., etc. Maybe the law is an ass. But then you think, if we're not being punished twice, how are there 10 minutes of injury time? And the obvious answer from the City faithful and the fans saying how disgusting it was that Arsenal turned up to get a draw. I want to, far be it from me to let the facts ruin a perfectly good story, but it is worth investigating. So if we go to Opta Analyst, which is Opta's analysis page, and Opta, in case you didn't know, and I'm sure you did, compile and collate all of the statistics for the Premier League to be disseminated. So they write, and I'm reading this from their page, theanalyst.com. Everyone knew what was coming. You knew it. Your dog knew it. Pep Guardiola knew it. Mikel Arteta definitely knew it. With Arsenal leading 2-1 at half-time away to Manchester City and down to 10 men after Leandro Trossard's red card, there was only one thing for it. Get all 9 outfielders behind the ball in the lowest of blocks and defend for your lives. With 12.4 possession and just 29 completed passes in the entire second half, Arsenal did just that. And it very nearly worked. Very nearly. So let's flesh this out with a little context. Manchester City, as I said before the game, are thought to be the irresistible force of football. They have the world's leading striker, scoring more goals than some teams, many teams, most teams, and the greatest manager of all time, talent all over the pitch, the world's best team. And you would imagine, therefore, that going to their place, somewhere that nobody has won in nearly 2 years, November 22, like when Brentford did it, you would think that given that they've won 4 Premier Leagues in a row, that this team, amongst the pantheon of great teams, above all others currently playing, would know how to break down a 10-man team given 55 minutes to do it. So what else would you do? What else is sensible to do? I know Ange Postecoglou would probably have played high line and got caught in a break, might have lost 8-0, but given it a bloody good go. We didn't do that. And one of the reasons we didn't do that, which everyone seems to have overlooked when they say that we came for a draw, when they criticised us last season for being happy with a draw. More on that in a moment. But when they criticise us for playing for a draw, it overlooks the fact that until the 99th minute, we were winning the game. We weren't holding out for a draw. We were holding out for 3 points. And we only failed to do so because of all of the time added on. So let's look at this. Now, Arsenal came seconds from surviving an onslaught. But as well as defending slightly, Arsenal did employ some of the darker arts during their second half display to burn as much time as possible and disrupt City's momentum. That's the narrative. And this is the Opta analyst, so they will have the numbers on it. But how were they able to get away with it? And how much did it actually impact the game? And they investigate. So they say the first thing to say is that contrary to what you might think, we saw a lot of football in this fixture. In total, the match lasted 109 minutes and 17 seconds. That made it the longest game so far this season in the Premier League, eclipsing the 109 minutes and 8 seconds Aston Villa versus Wolves, which was the day earlier. The ball was in play for 63 minutes and 28 seconds. That's the 5th longest in the game so far this season. Let that sink in. All the games have been played so far this season. This is top 5. Overall, that means the ball was in play for 58.1% of the time. That's by no means an abnormal figure given the Premier League average is 56. Let me read that again. Overall, that means the ball was in play 58.1% of the time, and that's by no means an abnormal figure given the Premier League average for 2024-25 is 56.8%. We saw more football than on average, but this was not an average game. If you look at things by halves, it gets more interesting, they say. The first half saw the ball in play just 51.7% of the time. Now, it's worth saying it wasn't just Arsenal players. If you recall, right at the kickoff, Rodri went down, clutching his face as if he'd been elbowed. And those of us who couldn't see what had happened must have been worried, as I was, that Kai Havertz had done something irretrievably stupid and punched Rodri. But he didn't. They just barged into each other. Now, far be it from me to accuse another player of simulation, but I'm going to do it. That's simulation. If he hasn't been punched in the face and he's gone down clutching his face because Kai Havertz barged into him, but only 5 games have seen a lower mark than 51% possession this season. In the second period, though, the figure rises to 64.4%. Right, 64.4% of balls in play. Only 2 second halves have seen a higher percentage, and both of them were other Man City games, West Ham and Brentford. Surprising on the surface, but dig a little deeper and see the trends clear for everyone. Manchester City basically had the ball for the entire second half. That's 87.6% possession. And whenever the ball went out of play, they were really quick to restart. So on throw-ins, for example, they took just 9.5 seconds, and that's way under the average league of 16.2. On the other hand, of course, Arsenal took every opportunity to slow things down. On average, 42.7 seconds to restart the game after being awarded either a corner, a goal kick, a free kick, or a throw-in. And that's the second highest average of any side this season. So it is a lot. Before the weekend, they previously held the record of 41 seconds against Brighton. Same thing, down to 10 men. Because we were defending for the majority of the game, Arsenal's main source of delay in the game came through goal kicks. Now, David Raya had 12 of them, and there's no question that he took as long as he possibly could, 45.3 seconds. That's comfortably the most time spent taking goal kicks this season. So we did delay the game as much as possible. But aside from goal kicks, we also took our time over free kicks. Each one of them was 43 seconds. That's 30% longer than the average. So I guess what we're seeing here is that we took every opportunity that we had to delay the game. And that was an approach that was met with some criticism, not least from City's players after the game. Bernardo Silva was quick to deride the way Arsenal set the team up. There was only one team that came to play football. The other came to play to the limits of what was possible and do what was allowed by the referee, unfortunately. And then quizzed on how the rivalry compares with Liverpool, he said, well, Liverpool always come to play, etc., etc. But it was a difficult afternoon for both teams, how they stopped the play, how they used a side of football that not many teams do. You can call it clever or dirty. This is John Stones, by the way. You can call it clever or dirty, whichever way you want to put it. They break up the game, which upsets the rhythm. They use it to their advantage, and we dealt with it very well. No, you didn't. You didn't deal with it very well. You dealt with it with an abject lack of ambition or creativity or ideas of any kind. You had the ball 87% of the time, and all you seem to want to do is pass it around in front of our back you had the yeah, I'm getting agitated, you can tell. You had the ball for 87% of the time and just passed it around in front of the area. Pep Guardiola even alludes to this fact in a post-match interview. The fact that any team would try and hang on to a lead, he said, maybe I would have done the same. You have to admit that. And I think that out of all of this, Arteta and Guardiola probably come out of it with the most credit for not getting involved in needless agitation. But there is a deep fact here, right? The fact is, as they go on to say, the amount of time, aside from the goal kicks, the Gunners did take our time over free kicks, but aside from that, Arsenal didn't really have much of an avenue to delay the game. They just had 5 throw-ins and 2 corners. In fact, such was City's dominance that Arsenal had 32 opportunities to delay the game in possession. That's the 3rd lowest total for any side in this game of the season. Sorry, in a game for this season. Of course, we tried to disrupt City's set pieces when we could. But Jesus, for example, was booked trying to delay a corner. But the 2 games where teams had a lower number of delay opportunities were also both games involving Man City. That's Ipswich and Brentford. Perhaps this is an underrated and overlooked benefit of monopolising the ball so much. When you're the better team, you really do limit the opponent's ability to kill the game. Arsenal's approach to the game has been met with criticism, but nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that it just isn't possible that we could have delayed the game this much if we only had 12% of the game. The game itself had more playtime than all but 4 games in the Premier League. Manchester City had a ridiculous amount of time against 10 men to try and win this game. And when they finally, 2 minutes after the injury time, when they finally get that equaliser and the stadium erupts and the fans run around and Erling Haaland has his petulant moment, when all of that is done, Gabriel's comment was brilliant. We had to check the scoreboard to make sure we hadn't lost because of the way that Man City was celebrating. The fact that there are such double standards at play here, I just want to say, whatever is said from this point on by Arsenal fans or City fans, I'm doing a live tonight, we'll talk about it a lot more. Whatever is said about this game, it seems really obvious to me that Manchester City have been rattled. They're scared. And I can't wait for them to come back to the Emirates because they don't always come to the Emirates and come out free-flowing attacking. 2 years ago, we played better than them. They sat back, played really well, hit us on the counter. Last season, they tried to do the same and we choked the life out of the game and beat them with 1-0. And their fans were all salty about it, saying it was a lucky deflection, like those goals don't count. Notice I'm not talking about Michael Oliver. I'm not here to say because he's made a trip to the Emirates that he got heavily paid for, because he didn't give a penalty to Liverpool, because he always seems to find in favour of Man City, because he didn't send Kovacic off twice in the match against us at the Emirates last season because he wanted to keep the game alive. And yet he's happy to send Leandro Trossard, knowing what that would mean to the second half. I'm going to assume that he's doing his best job, but it was one that definitely can call into question his performance. I will be doing that in the live tonight, as well as looking at all of the other reaction to this game in the Aftermath show tonight at 10 o'clock. I invite you to join us Tuesday, 10 o'clock BST. And I look forward to having a lively debate with anyone who wants to come on. And until I see you then, be lucky and lots of love.